I'm Sarah Ali El Sayed, and I'll start with saying Salamu alaikum to everyone, peace be upon you. I come from Cairo, Egypt, but I've been living here in Arizona now for 4 years doing my PhD on regenerative food studies. So all these topics are super important for me. Previously to coming to Arizona, I actually helped found the chapters of Slow Food in Egypt and the Architaste and various chapters across the country. So I've been very involved with Slow Food coming to the United States. And then when I came here, literally on week 1, the first thing I did was find my Slow Food people in Phoenix. So I've been connected to this organization for a while now. But this, there's a lot we're going to be talking about today. As Allison said, we're really going into like the kind of the future, the fate of seeds. We're going to be talking about patenting, intellectual property rights, genetically modified organisms, and a lot of these practices that maybe threaten the Earth's biodiversity, as well as livelihoods, culture, the health and existence of billions of people across the globe. So there are some, difficult topics that we're going to be challenging today, but we also have perspectives of how to challenge that and what to do. And we want to try and ensure that we have a right to grow food and our seeds that has been passed down to us from our ancestors. And so we start this keynote this morning with 2 wonderful keynote speakers. We're going to start off first with Bill Mcdorman. I feel like needs no introductions, but I will introduce you. And then after Bill, we're going to have Fatima, and then we will then have a Q&A session. So if you do have questions, you can start writing them already in the chat, or keep the questions to the end, and then we'll bring them all up. So, your choice. Write them already in the chat, and we'll pull them out, or wait until the end. But I'd like to invite Bill and introduce you. So Bill Mcdorman, I would say, has been a seed saver and fighting for seeds for decades. He's a fantastic teacher, educator, writer. He's the founder of several projects. Currently, he calls himself a teacher, an IT person at the Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance, which is in Cornville, Arizona, but he's also its founder. And he's co-founded several projects like Down Home Project, Garden City Seeds, Seed Trust, High Altitude Gardens, and the Seed School. He's the author of a book called Basic Seed Saving. He's also the former executive director of Native Seed Search, which is an important database for seeds where people can purchase seeds, and currently, as I said, is working with Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance. So without further ado, I would like you to join us. I will say I personally met Bill a couple of years ago when he was teaching at the grain school, and I learned so much from growing grains to making pizzas and tortillas. So this is, he's all of these things. So thank you so much, Bill.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank you and Allison both for all the upfront work. I know how hard this is. We should everybody who's coming to this conference should be very grateful to all of you and what you've learned and how you've pulled us all together, because it's a Herculean task. And because we're all together, I think it gains more strength. And so thank you to everybody who's come here. So I just thought I would explain a little bit about what I do. The Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance was started 6 years ago around this really simple idea that in order to have a sustainable and resilient food and healthy food culture in our region, the Rocky Mountain West, we need our own seeds. So seeds for the Rocky Mountains, from the Rocky Mountains. That's our mission. It's simple. And we hope to put ourselves out of business. In my 40 years being involved in seed issues, some of the things I've learned, one is that the institutions of seed diversity are often not, how shall I say it diplomatically, up to the task of actually doing what needs to be done now in order for us to have the diversity in each of our regions around the world to make it, in my own opinion. And so that's what we started Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance to do, is somehow find a way to get enough seed diversity underlying our beautiful, local food movement. And thank you to Slow Foods for being a big part of that. It's incredible, but it's absolutely necessary in our view to have slow seeds underneath slow food. And it's even in our region where we've been working for 6 years, you'd have to say that the vast majority, maybe 99.9% of the seeds being used, even in conscious organic gardens and farms, is coming from outside our region, sometimes thousands of miles away. And now we've learned that even in some of our organic seed catalogs in this country, they're being contract grown in China. And that just doesn't work somehow. So I'm going to talk a little bit about GMOs. I don't think that's the focus. It's overwhelmingly complex. I sent in some links so that you can learn more about it if you want to be up to date about it. I'll mention a few things. Mainly going to talk about plant patenting because that is the new threat to us, and I'll explain why. And then hopefully there'll be a little bit of time left over for questions. So I'm going to share my screen here. I think I can get it. All right, I think that will work. So, Sarah, if it's not showing up the way it should, please let me know. I think, there. I think what I want to do is use the slideshow. All right, I'm assuming that my slide is up. So I thought I'd start by summarizing the whole thing. I'm not going to have enough time to go through in depth much of anything, but I think I've got enough experience to help you.
Hold on, Phil.
Yeah.
It was up and then you did something and then it went away.
Oh.
Just go, don't
All
try
right.
to share the slideshow. I think you just
All right, let me
do the first step, but not the second, and I think it'll work.
All right.
Let's see. I'll wait and make sure it works.
All right. So, and then
the basic part of it.
All right, and then let me see if I can. No, yeah.
That's
so
good right there.
That's good right there. So you can just see the slide. All right.
Yep.
Great. Okay, so I just want to start with a quote from Joy Hout, who is also a former director of Native Seed Search. And she said something that was really profound to me one day. And I think it's something I want to remind everybody of. When you buy seeds, when you choose a cultivar, you're choosing an entire agricultural system. And why that's important now is because it's an either or. In so many, we do have so many local and locally adapted choices these days, or we have a hugely centralized industrial system, and that's represented, the pinnacle of that's probably the genetically modified. So I just want you to understand that every time you plant a seed, you are choosing, you are voting, you're using maybe one of the most powerful political tools you have, your dollars, and you are buying into an industrial system. And so our goal is to get everyone in the Rocky Mountain West out of that system so that we can return to what we had a couple of generations ago, and produce and save and share our own seeds and stories. So the GMO issue is complicated. As I said, the cat's already out of the bag. This is from 2016. There are whole crops. And this was a Swedish researcher even crowing about on a social media blog that he had already eaten an entire meal for a dinner from crops that were being grown that were genetically modified. He wouldn't tell anybody what they were or where it was or whatever, because they knew they would get into trouble, because at that point especially it hadn't been approved. But that's where we are this day. And the reason why GMOs are so much more ubiquitous, even in the last 6 months, than they were before, is because of CRISPR-Cas9. And I invite you all to look into it. And there are some several really great intro videos if you want to double click on that subject and get into it. But basically, it just, for the first time, it made gene editing and genetic engineering cheap, easy to use. And there are literally there are high schools doing this now, just to give you an example in the United States. And because of this, there's been a big push. GMOs do not have a good reputation in our population, and the USDA has been forced to look into regulating them. But with CRISPR, they see the potential again to be so vast that they said, hey, let's see if we can find a new way around regulation. And so what they've argued is that they can gene edit without genetically engineering. And basically what that means is that they're taking genes out. They're not putting anything in that's new or different. And because of that difference, they argue that it doesn't need regulation. And up to now, that's what the USDA has decided. And now we're starting to see there may be 1,400, last time I looked, 2,100 gene edited crops being introduced into US agriculture because of this exception. Now, of course, a lot of this just took place in the last 4 years under a Republican no rules and regulations administration. So we're hoping that this may change, although the new administration's choice for Secretary of Agriculture, Vilsack, is a former attorney for Monsanto. So there may be another battle coming. If you're going to get into GMOs these days and you're going to try to understand CRISPR, maybe the most important thing that we should all understand is that they can use CRISPR now to edit the gametes. These are the sperm and egg cells. And by doing that, they not only edit the organism that they're working on, they edit its ability to pass on those new traits, that edited version, to every single offspring down line. And so for things like mosquitoes, this would only take 2 or 3 generations until a gene-edited mosquito would be all that would be left. And this is what's being talked about, to actually wipe out entire species on the planet. What could go wrong? And another thing to keep your eye on now is that we can gene edit without doing the engineering, but merely by spraying what they're calling RNAi sprays on crops. And so, this offers great profit potential. They could sell you a crop that's been gene edited not to go to seed and say it's a wheat crop. So you don't get your crop unless you buy the spray it on, it modifies it in the field, and then voila, you could turn on the reproduction. I mean, the ramifications of this are, wow, endless. What could go wrong? Up until a year or two ago, these were the genetically modified crops in the United States. This changes a lot. I highly recommend going to the Center for Food Safety. Andrew Kimbrell and his crew do a great job keeping up with this stuff. They also have a really wonderful history of seed, and especially this battle in industrial agriculture against genetically modified. Andrew himself has been the attorney in many of the lawsuits against Monsanto and the other genetically modified pharmaceutical and chemical companies that have been pushing these crops on U.S. Farmers and gardeners. And so these guys know firsthand, and this is one of my best references. Another place I like to go, these people keep up endlessly. They're from Canada. Actually, I think Pat Mooney moved this organization or started it in Canada because he knew he would get so much pushback in the US for actually trying to tell the truth. And so ETC Group has emerged worldwide as someone you want to tap into if you want to keep up on this topic. And before somebody tells you it's safe, or you read that, there have been millions of people now eating genetically modified food, just remember that the same marketing firm telling you that is the same one that was hired by the tobacco industry to keep smoking on grocery store shelves freely and openly and marketed to our teenagers for 50 years after the data was in that it caused lung cancer. So of course, many of you may have seen this chart. This is actually the little blue circles are seed companies. The red circles are pharmaceutical or chemical companies. And this just shows from 1996 to 2018 ownership change, how almost all the seed companies in the world have been bought up by what we now call the gene giants. And so that's, of course, resulted in a tremendous loss of diversity. And in our seed schools, we get into arguments over how many crops have we, how much have we really lost? How much diversity is gone because of this centralization? And as a colleague of mine said one time, it's really hard to count what you've lost. In fact, one could argue it's impossible. We don't know how much we've lost. A general survey by the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, though, in '99 showed that more than 90% of crop varieties have disappeared from farmers' fields. These are farmers' fields all over the world. These are the 55, 65, 75 million farmers that make up the majority of the world's farms, that produce 70% of its food. And more than 90% of our crop diversity has disappeared. And as we face climate change, and this is what we're acutely aware of at Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance, we need more diversity. We need more kinds of all of these crops growing, because we don't know if we're going to get hit with a drought or a flood, or we know there are new diseases coming. And so the more diversity we have, the safer we're going to be, the stronger our agricultural ecosystem will be. So diversity has never been more important, and yet we're starting from a place where we've lost 90%. And maybe that 90% in the last 2 generations is all. And so some of it's still out there. We're finding it. We're reconnecting. I mean, it's not hopeless, but what we need now are people re-engaging and bringing that diversity into their own farms and gardens. And one of the biggest single problems that we're finding in the modern world to keep us from doing that now is plant patenting. This is from the Johnny Selected Seed Catalog. It's the definition of utility patents in their catalog. And what it means is seeds can only be used for crop production. They cannot be used for seed saving, replanting, resale, giving away, or use in any breeding program. That's bad. The only way we're going to get that diversity back is if millions of us start growing and saving our own seeds and adapting those to where we are. That's the system that created all this diversity over the last 10,000 years, largely by indigenous women, largely in what we call the global South, on small farms that are still struggling to try to do that for us. And these utility patents aren't only regulating seeds now, certified organic seeds on our own catalogs, but they're being pushed all over the world. We are the center of it. If you're from the United States, it's our responsibility to question this. And first of all, to stop doing it ourselves. So how do we do that? So I wrote to Johnny's and I asked him for a list. I need the list of all the utility patented and PVP, which is another form of plant protection done by the USDA, so that we know what to avoid. We're seed savers. We'll just ignore them. Not only that, we have seed libraries. I think there's 82 seed libraries now in the Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance directory list. And one of the things that we know is that it's not legal by the definition of a utility patent for patented seeds to be in our seed libraries and be shared in exchange. And so we need a list. We need the names. And this is what I got back from Johnny's. No master list exists. And what they said was, go to the United States Patent and Trade Office website and look them up. You can get your own list. And so I did that. I went to the USDA's PVP, Plant Variety Protection Office, and they've got their own database to see which ones are protected that way. And I searched there for them, and it was shocking what I found. 78 out of the 99 variety names in the Johnny Selected Seed Catalog, and this was just on a month ago, are not traceable in either the PVP or the Patent and Trade Office database. They just don't come up. And the reason why is that many of these companies now are patenting traits. They're not patenting the variety names. And so those varieties are patented because the traits in them are patented, but the variety names are never mentioned. And so it would be Johnny's would be the only people that could tell us what varieties are patented, or the supplier, in this case, for most of them, is a company called Vitalis. that supplies Johnny's many of the certified organic seeds anyway. They're the ones that could supply us with a list. And I wrote to them and I got the same answer, that no list exists. Or in the last couple of years, I don't get any response from them at all. And so this is what I found about a month ago, just going through trying to figure out in Johnny's what was patented and what wasn't. And so what I found was 56 out of the 99 varieties, lettuce varieties. These are open pollinated, easy to save, many of them certified organic. These are the seeds that we teach everyone in our seed schools to save. This is the future of agriculture, if you think about it, because this is the seeds being used in the closed environment agriculture, in the greenhouses. They're being grown, you know, on top of Whole Foods now. You know, and then the lettuce is being brought right down into the stores. This is really important stuff. And look, 57%, you can't save the seeds anymore. 46 carried utility patents, the most restrictive intellectual property ever applied to plants on the globe. 36 had PVP protection. And as I said, only 21 out of 99, that's another way of saying it, were actually searchable or discoverable as having these either PVP or utility patent labels on databases that were searchable. And as I said, this is largely why. This is a couple of years ago in the Salvanova green lettuce, very popular lettuce. This is from the Johnny's webpage. At the bottom, it says utility patents, and it gives the patent numbers. Well, I searched all those patent numbers, and nowhere does it say Salvanova. And the new Johnny's catalog doesn't even say those utility patents anymore. This information has disappeared. And in fact, it's disappeared whether they're utility patent or not from a lot of varieties. And it's just become almost impossible. Now, you know, to be fair, Johnny's does list some of the varieties as utility patented, but it's an incomplete list, right? And if you go to other catalogs, I went to the high mowing catalog, and this is actually this is another shot from the Johnny's, and this is a variety of lettuce that they sell that they do actually tell you that there are utility patents on the variety, which means that you can't save the seeds. And so you have to look carefully, though. It's not highlighted. And as I said, there are mistakes. When I went to high mowing and looked, you know, they actually this year, were happy to report to me. I wrote them for a list, and they actually sent me a list for the first time. And they said that they were going to mark everything in their catalog that's utility patented, although they have not done that on their online catalog. They do mark PVPs pretty well, but again, I have found mistakes. When I got out the territorial online and I pulled up what I know as one of the utility patented lettuces, no mention. Territorial Seed Company's certified organic lettuce, no mention that this lettuce is utility patented. So you could get this, you could think you're saving seeds from your lettuce, you could take them down to your local seed library, and we all get into trouble. And not only that, this is, and we go into this in depth in our seed schools, underlying this in the last few years is these companies that are selling these utility patented seeds, and right here, Enzazaden is the parent company of Vitalis, which is selling many of those varieties to Johnny's. They've joined together internationally to start an anti-infringement bureau to police this sort of stuff. And I got really interested about this, so I went to their site and I looked, and they call it piracy. If you save your own seeds from one of these utility patented plants, you are a pirate. And the production, use, and trading of illegal products is an important source for the financing of organized crime. That's the category that you can be put into. And then recently, there's a new United States version of this, SIPA, the Seed Innovation and Production Alliance, that these same companies are forming in the United States. And they've got toll-free numbers, seed tip with rewards to turn somebody in if they are actually saving seeds from a patented variety. So what can we do? Look carefully in your seed catalogs, all right? And every time you buy seeds now, interact with your company, ask them, say, I need to know whether these varieties are protected, PVP, or utility patented. This you have to do. This is all we can do to turn this thing around. They're only going to do that if there's public pressure. Now, the organic seed or at Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance, I've got a list that we're starting, and it will be up on our website. We've got a patent-free seed campaign we're trying to roll out nationwide. If you want to join that, you can come to our site and join that, and we'll keep you up to date on what we're learning. And we will be beginning to post lists and forms so that if you find something that's utility patented through your interaction with companies, you can post that on the website and we'll try to verify it so that we together can start to create a list so that we know, so that our breeders know. You know, Frank Morton gave a really impassioned speech at the Organic Seed Alliance a few years ago. He's a lettuce seed breeder. And if you look through the utility patents, one of the things that's been patented is a burgundy color in lettuce. Well, what burgundy? You know, as Frank said, I work with dozens of burgundy lettuces. Does that mean that I'm going to put years into creating a new variety of lettuce that I'll release, you know, to the US organic seed market? And then somebody's going to swoop in and tell me it's patented? He said, I can't find out. There's no way for us to sleuth through and find out right now what's patented completely, you know, the complete list and what's not. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important. So this might be kind of shocking to you, and I hope it's not depressing, because you know what we believe at Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance, and I believe personally after teaching seed saving for 40 years, is that we will win this battle. We don't have to fight anybody over GMOs or this patenting. What we do need to do is inform ourselves as to what we're doing and start everybody growing and saving their own seeds. This is the key. It was like this epiphany I had about a year ago when I realized that none of the institutions, I was doing research on seed banks, global seed banks, Svalbard, and some of the other big gene banks, and the US Seed Storage Laboratory in Fort Collins, Colorado, and all of them have one thing in common. They are underfunded. And they're all kind of hitting this wall at the same time. They all, you know, in the 70s, we knew we were losing diversity. So the whole world tried to save everything quickly before it disappeared. And that was successful. You know, regional banks like Native Seed Search were really successful in that. But I can tell you, after being the director of one of those seed banks, nobody has the money to take all those varieties back out and grow them again and get fresh seed. And seed dies. Not only that, seed banks are targets. I'm sure there's talk in this in the Slow Seed Summit in many places about how seed banks have been blown up. The one in Syria is the latest one, but Iraq seed bank was blown up when the US invaded. The seed bank that the Sandinistas had started in Nicaragua were blown up by the Contras, we called them, that was funded by US funds. Whenever you get that many seeds together, it's a target. And so what we think you should do, we should all do, is for us to all go back to the old system, the system that got us here. And that is everybody in every region growing and saving its own seeds. We do need regional backup, just in case there's a flood or fires or political unrest, or maybe even snowstorms now, like hit Texas. You know, and the water and the gas goes off and the pipes break and all the things that can happen in this fragile new world. But if everybody in a region is growing and saving seeds and sharing them with each other, they're creating a resilient network that can happen. And there's just one thing I want you to believe. You know, people go, oh, we need technology. We need big companies. We need all these institutions to do this, and they can do it better. Just remember, they don't have the funding, that it's going to take a grassroots movement to create the diversity we need. Because it's a simple, you know, tautology. The more people grow and save seeds, the more varieties we create, the more diversity we have. Because each time that happens, it adapts a little bit to where it's being grown. It's different. That's how we got everything. And so packed inside each seed is a more powerful technology, I would argue, than a cell phone, for the simple reason that it's self-replicating. Inside that seed is 1 million more seeds. And not only that, it's got AI built in. You can take those seeds all over the planet, plant them, and through its natural process with us helping, growing and saving them, it can learn to adapt in real time. It can change its own DNA to adapt to the conditions of that place. We don't have any technology that is that elegant. And it means that any of us could go anywhere in the world with a pocket full of seeds and start a whole new agriculture for that region that's adapted to us. But it's got to be, it can't be patented or we're going to run into legal problems. And it's easier to start with open pollinated or non-hybrid varieties. And so that's why we're big on pushing those. And so, what we were trying to think this through, what do we really need in this country? We don't need a million Monsanto march, a million march against Monsanto, which we had a few years ago, which was a great thing. And people came out all over the world on the same day. Next time we march, let's march for something. Let's march for seed saving. And so we came up with this idea, the Million Seed Saver March. And so if you want to join this, you can come to our website and just sign up. We're not using this list for anything but to alert you as we come together to make sure that we, actually take this back. And we can do that. There are 120 million gardeners in the United States, and very, very few of them save seeds. It seems like low-hanging fruit to get a million of us. And along those lines, the Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance has set up directories. We're using off-the-shelf software that was created for the Howard Dean campaign. So it's relatively inexpensive for us to run. It's open source. And so we have forums so you can come on, and all of those people on that forum there pledged to grow and save and share the seeds to at least one variety. So wherever you move in the country, you can click on one of those people, find out what they're saving, and get in touch with them and exchange seeds with them. And we don't even know what's going on. This list grows every day. We ourselves can grassroots self-organize with these directories now and start to spread our seeds and our seed stories to each other. You can also go on there and say, search for carrots or whatever else you're looking for. Einkorn, grains are on there also. And so our number one thing is to get as many people doing this as possible. So how do we do that? We teach seed saving, and for 10 years I've been doing seed schools, and we've got over 1,200 graduates now from around the world. And then we realized, oh man, that's not going to be enough. So we started doing seed school teacher training. Let's train teachers that can go out and start their own seed schools. And now that's starting to happen. And so we're going to have another one coming up on March 3rd. And because of COVID still, we can't do it, live over a 7-day period, which is what we used to do. So we're doing it over 10 weeks. We meet once a week on Wednesdays at noon. So if you're interested in that, you can go, and I think I sent a link to that. And there's a list of the seed teachers that have been through our programs that have now signed up. So if you need a seed teacher to jumpstart your community to start saving their own seeds, hey, there's a resource for you. You can find those people. And I encourage everybody to become a seed teacher. You can do this. It's simple. We don't need all the complicated rules in seed saving that industrial agriculture needs. All we need to do is grow and save seeds and eat the things that we like and save the seeds for those. It's really simple. That's the system that worked for 10,000 years before people even knew what genetics were. Right? You have to say that this system was effective. It created all the food crops we have. All we have to do is re-engage and do that and have fun and be passionate about it and get more and more people to do it. So before I go, I just want to mention, at 3:30, Jack Kloppenberg's going to speak. That's 3:30 Eastern on here. He's got an initiative. So what Jack's done is helped organize, first in the United States, the Open Source Seed Initiative, and then globally, a way to put sort of an open source seed label on new varieties that are being created by breeders and farmers and home seed savers before they're released into the public. And so what that means when you do that is that never in the future can that variety be used to be patented and sold. And so it's really an important stage in what we're doing. So we need millions of seed savers on the foundation. We're the ones that created the diversity that the world had. We're the ones that can afford to create it because we can always eat our mistakes. Doesn't matter, right? We're so small scale, and maybe we'll invent something new like a pump zini that we really, really like that'll become a hit throughout the United States or the world. And that's happened over and over again. And then we need breeders to come in and clean up those lines and make sure that they're uniform enough for our market gardeners to use so that they can sell them to our restaurants or whatever. And that's where Frank comes in with a global open source seed initiative. So that's a really important thing to tap into. So I'm willing to take questions. I see that I've used just about all my time, but I will be back at the end of today's session as part of the Q&A and the panel. So thank you very much.
Thank you. This was so exciting and informative, at times depressing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a lot of information that we need to absorb, like really understanding what CRISPR is and that RNA
Right.
spray that you talked about. We should be, active citizens that are aware of these things and fight back. This is important. The thing that surprises me the most is the patenting. You mentioned that when we first started talking, especially on organics, because this is what we think is one
Right.
way forward, right? And so we need to be extra careful with this. And but I love the fact that you're still hopeful. There's so much hope in your presentation, and I'm sure there's going to be tons of questions because I've already collected some, but we'll leave it to the end. And I hope we all march for the million seed savers, because that's an amazing
Yes.
thing to
Thank
do.
you.
So
All right.
I will start now, introducing Fatima, but I
Right.
want you to come back in at the end, Bill, so that we can
I will.
answer a lot
I'll
of the
be
questions.
listening. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Wonderful. So, okay, a lot to absorb. I can see a lot of activity on the chat. I know people are angry, but also people are excited to move and to react and to become more aware, which is wonderful. The next speaker, I only got introduced to her about a month ago when we started talking, Fatima Ahmed, and it might be that we both were connected through the Nile River. She's going to be telling us about her story. She has been raised between Denver and Ethiopia, and so the Nile River connects us. And so from the second I met her, I felt like there was an affinity between us. She's co-founder, executive director, and head farmer of Frontline Farming. She serves as president of Mile High Farmers and is co-convener for Project Protect Food System Workers. She's also a lecturer in the Masters of Environmental Studies program at Colorado University in Boulder. She, as I said, was born in Denver, but she was raised between Denver and Ethiopia. And she's been working on organic and heirloom vegetables in her own acreage as part of a land co-op, setting up farms for restaurants, and as farm manager for multi-acre community farms in both Milwaukee and Denver. But she had a different history before becoming a farmer. She was actually a political scientist and was engaged in issues affecting farming communities, such as the push for what we're talking about today, which is, GMOs across Southern and Eastern Africa. So she brings in also that kind of global perspective along with the very local one in Denver. She believes in resistance by the world's land caretakers to single solutions to crop productivity and seeks to work on reframing ideas of what food security is. She currently serves as a mayor-appointed member of the Sustainable Food Council on the Denver African American Commission, and is 2020 and 2021 Rocky Mountain Farmers Union Fellow. We are super excited to learn more about all the advocacy and perspectives you have. And I know there's also Jason, who is going to be helping with tech support. I do not have an introduction for him, so I'm just going to exit here and leave it to you. Thank you so much, Fatima.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for the kind introduction. Just and start the slideshow. Wonderful. Thank you all for being here on a Saturday and valuing what we have to say about seeds. It's always super exciting to present to an audience that cares about this stuff, as people like Bill and I care about it a lot and can talk people's heads off about it. So I am Fatima Ahmed, and a lot of introductions there. I am a farmer first and foremost, and I have just here with me who's helping me with tech support. He always does. He's one of our farmers and graphic designers. So thank you, Justin. You can go to the next slide. Jessalyn, you can click over. Okay. So whenever I start talks about any topic, I always like to begin by giving acknowledgements to those who have taught me and whose shoulders I've been built on, and just the ancestors and so many people who have brought me to this point. So of course, there's family, land, ancestors, teachers, and such an honor to be here presenting with Bill Mcdorman today. Giant to me, and so also someone that I carry with me. I really wanted to focus today specifically on the Black farmers and immigrant farmers that I worked with and really taught me a lot about farming. And you can go to the next slide, Jessalyn. So what they taught me is that you can save seeds too. So you hear all these, kind of accreditations about me, but my path to becoming a farmer, wasn't easy and wasn't something I just had naturally done. As Sarah said, I grew up, I was born in Denver, and my family traveled back to Ethiopia when the war ended there, and grew up traveling between here and Ethiopia. My family's from Yemen and Ethiopia. And so I really, as a good child of immigrants, went the academic path and was always super concerned about food. Of course, growing up in the United States, people's image of Ethiopia was always just a famine. And really, Ethiopia is one of the most topographically diverse places on Earth, and a big place that we see a lot of land grabbing and different forms of colonization in terms of plants right now. And so I academically was focused on the fight against genetically modified seeds in Eastern and Southern Africa that I already saw coming. And so as I worked on that with farmers there, and I talked to them and they welcomed me because I speak the languages and look like them, I realized I was instrumentalizing them really to just write books for the global north. And their questions were pretty direct, like, what's going on with my irrigation? Why are these pests like this? What the heck is going on with climate? And as someone who had never grown anything, I didn't have those answers. So I put academia down and became a farmer myself. And it's really hard, right, to become a farmer. There really aren't paths to do it that are not very exploitative. You're breaking your back, you're working all day. And if you don't come from that, and especially for BIPOC communities, it's very inaccessible to think about going and living somewhere rural for basically free on a stipend. So I did a little bit of that and traveled in some countries working on sustainable farming, and then decided to get my certification in agriculture and ecology and on-site farming. And it kind of made me really intimidated. It made me feel like seed saving was just this like super technical thing, and that I had to do it exactly right. And I had to know about how to cage my tomatoes because, cherry tomatoes, they can cross, and different things like that. And so I was scared. And when I started farming in Wisconsin, the Black elder farmers there, they just saved their seeds. And when they showed me and saved their Black cherry tomato seeds, and they took off that next year and were so much more robust than the ones I had bought, I learned the value in that I could do it too. So it's important for me to tell you that you are a knower. Know this world is yours. There's nobody who is more an expert. We've entered this world of the objective scientist who's going to tell you about your subjective experiences, and we completely discard all these forms of knowledge, particularly regenerative knowledge that exists there for us. So don't let people make you feel scared to be in nature. You can go to the next one, Jessalyn. Thank you. Flowers are a perfect start. Flowers in many ways are perfect, right? They contain a lot of them, both the male and female sexual organs within them. And so just, collect some marigolds, let them dry, get fully produced, and then pick them. I'm always like, sometimes we're so busy on the farm that you're like, I can't save my seeds. And then, I'll go over to my friends and they've just got like all these marigolds just cut and bagged. And I'm like, why didn't I do that? And it's interesting how taking it from that form there that would have been discarded and then putting it in a bag gives it value. And maybe at that time when you're in it, you kind of don't think about how important it is. And when the season comes around, you're like, shucks. But do it. Just start somewhere. We can go to the next one, Jeff. Value traditional ways of knowing. Like the story I told you, there are many people who are already doing this, like the abuelita down the street who raises chickens and gives you eggs. Just, you know, the Black farmers, the immigrants, the people across the world in Africa, where 80% of food is grown from seeds saved. So look around. Don't only look to academia and institutions, but humans can give you knowledge as well. We can go on, Ja. Be willing to experiment. What's the worst that can happen? You know, there's some basic things to know, like zucchini, like cannabis have, you know, male and female. So those can cross easily. But even if that happened, it's like Bill was saying, you might end up with a pumpzini. And many times this is how new varieties are created. So just be willing to experiment. There isn't much bad that can happen. We can go on, Ja. So one of the things that is important to reflect on is, what is a seed and what does it mean? I always love to talk about seeds with young people, children. Whenever I have people at the farm and I have them seeding, everyone wants to seed. I always tell them, like, you know, the seed is living. Honor it as you're planting. Remember that it's living. Like, pray to it. Think about it. And people will be like, oh man, this hippie girl, like whatever, you know? But when I tell children that, it's just so beautiful. As they're planting, they'll be thinking about it so hard. I've seen them just standing there over it, and they take it so seriously that I tell them that, and they offer that prayer. And I like to tell them a seed is like a child. It encapsulates the entire potential of that being. It's like you have this little sunflower seed and it grows to be so big. And that's just so amazing how much is contained within that. And so with kids too, I'm like, I see you, you're all there. And it's a good way to compare it. And like, you know, Bill had said, the need for seed banks to live and not only be banked. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we can move on. I just wanted to frame for you all a little bit about how I think about seeds before we kind of jump into some of the content. So I really wanted to talk about the framing of GMO seeds as they're presented, not as much about the inherent sort of issues with them on genetic levels, but just how we talk about them and a lot of the colonial and sometimes outright racist assumptions that accompany them. So when we talk about African countries, it's important to recognize that the process of colonization completely depleted these countries of their indigenous food crops and made them become concentrated in luxury and commodity crops. So in Ethiopia, coffee, and I'm going to touch on patenting around that as well, but rubber, cacao, and things that in the marketplace, you know, are an elastic good. So when something like the price of oil goes up, the price of coffee and different things like that are going to go down because they're a luxury commodity. So when we think now about sort of this push for genetically modified seeds in African countries, it's often called the New Green Revolution, which really bothers me because it makes this assumption like we missed the boat on the first Green Revolution, when in fact, it didn't work there. And as we've seen over time, how it ravished countries like India and consolidated more and more into industrialized production. So oftentimes we hear that GMOs are framed as an answer to hunger. And that's really interesting because we know that hunger isn't so much an issue of food quantity, and that we have more than enough food to feed the world over. And in the United States right now, for example, we deal with 40% food waste. And I can tell you myself, as we're reaching really crazy levels of hunger under the pandemic that, of course, disproportionately affect our Latinx and Black communities at rates of over 50% right now in Colorado. We have our own free grocery and food rescue program, and food's still being dumped out there. So that's important to understand. And then, again, it's important to know that right now, 10% of the world's arable land is going into GMO production. Despite, the promises of the biotech industry, there really isn't any evidence that GMOs are currently increasing drought tolerance, enhanced nutrition, or any other consumer benefits, although it's always positioned that way when people talk about these countries. We know that the biggest GMO production is soybean and maize. And oftentimes, foods that are fillers in our foods for processed foods or feed for animals. And there's just so much about how this is working. In the US, we subsidize our industries, whereas other countries can't. And we are flooding things like wheat into countries that traditionally don't eat that and out competing them even in their own local economies for selling those foods. And with sort of bringing in these kinds of crops that they keep talking about in this way, we're not really thinking about what kinds of crops those are, whether those are really what those people want to eat. And so I often ask people to rethink the premises before coming to me and asking me, well, don't GMOs solve hunger? And it's kind of like, look at the data. So we can move on. I want to give you all a case study of a country that I'm from, Ethiopia. So Ethiopia is an excellent case of a study and biopiracy that we're seeing across the world. So maybe some of you all have heard of this grain called teff. I think in American people say teff or teff, and it's teff in Amharic, which is like the official language, but there are many languages in Ethiopia. And teff comes from the word in Amharic that means to be lost. And it's one of the smallest grains in the world, and it's technically a dwarf millet. It's a really unique grain because it doesn't have gluten. People with celiac can eat it. It's really high in iron and just has all of these great health benefits. So the story of teff in Ethiopia, and just like with genetically modified seeds, it's important to recognize that the people who are bringing these into these countries come under the guise of NGOs and benevolence and aid. So the biggest kind of pusher for GMOs in Africa is the Gates Foundation. And I'm sure you can kind of make a lot of associations yourself between patenting and intellectual property and perhaps their interest in entering into the seed world. So in Ethiopia, the way it started was that this Dutch company partnered with the Ethiopian government, and the agreement was that they would, work on this and share any sort of discoveries and research that they were able to come up with regarding it. And for people in Ethiopia, the traditional food we eat is injera. It's like a sour kind of flat crepe bread that is what we eat with many meals. It's been cultivated for over 3,000 years. It's kind of like what maize is to Mexico or rice is to China. And so they came and were like, we're going to share any of this genetic information for genetic use in 2004. In 2004, for whatever reason, they went ahead and filed a patent alone. And as Ethiopians, all of a sudden we were like, what? Our traditional food, teff, is patented by another country. And so it begs the question of, is it possible to patent a plant which has been a basic food staple in a country for thousands of years? Well, in principle, and according to international agreements, it should exclude plants from patenting. And it's kind of interesting what they did. There was a loophole. There's the upstream and downstream value chain of a plant. And so when a plant is processed into foodstuff, technology is then used. So it wasn't about the plant itself, but its flower form that was technically patented. And so, I mean, anytime you're if you're putting it in that flower form. So across the European Union, Japan, and some other countries held this patent. And it's like, how did that happen? Well, the process of how that patent happens is that an examiner sits at a database for a few hours when this patent comes through. If he can't find anything new, then it is a new patent. Certainly, we know that there aren't many written records from the global south in his database, right? So just even like how knowledge and data is used against us, both in different countries in the global south, but even here as BIPOC communities is really important to recognize. We're often left out of quantitative data and relegated to history or qualitative data or subjective experience. So there is some work for some of us to do, but it's also hard because you're like, well, you know, even when I deal with sort of a lot of the Black activism we do here, it's like the data's there for history and centuries, you know, but there's importance in sort of showing that more work. So the way that I'm happy to say about last year, actually an individual, a lawyer himself, got involved because he'd heard about it through a student. And so he started pressing on the matter and was able to kind of eliminate this patent and bring it to attention. And something that had so riled us for 15 years was able to be fought off with sort of that knowledge that is honored in this world that actually are the people that hold power. And my side note on coffee is that this is a perfect example as well with Ethiopia, because Ethiopia is famous for its coffee. We have many varieties. And when we have tried to go and patent it so that we could guarantee all of this money that's made off of coffee being sold for super expensive could come to farmers, the people that blocked it were Starbucks. And so it's interesting the power that industry and corporations have. And while countries like us have to abide by World Trade Organization rules, those in power really don't. And we see that even more and more in the world of just the corporate consolidation of our food system. I wanted to make a note to you all as well that in 2019, we see Ethiopia really for the first time, slowly and quietly accepting GMOs. And it's just ironic because first of all, there's already an NGO called Fair Planet, an Israeli-based NGO who's been in Ethiopia doing sort of field testing with GMOs, bringing maize and soy specifically. And again, I just want to point out that they miss the fact that over 80% of the food grown in these countries comes from homegrown farmer seeds. DuPont has opened its offices in Ethiopia in 2019, and they state that they seek to bring Ethiopia the best in class seeds. So these power imbalances of strong multinational companies and countries, weakened governments like Ethiopia with subsistence farmers is very dangerous. And it's also really sad because Ethiopia is recognized as the genetic grain basket of the world. There's so many varieties of grains that exist there that might yet save us. Like when we had issues with wheat here and consolidation of commercial growers into single kind of wheat here, we get one kind of disease and we've eliminated all our other varieties and haven't been making them live. And where are we going to go find it where they haven't been already contaminated in these ways? So this is in Ethiopia, actually, at the market where a farmer is kind of showing off his teif, that is the dark teif from Ethiopia, which is really good. We can move on, Justin. So what do we do? I know it's a lot, and I think that Bill really offered us some good ideas on how we engage as purchasing seeds. I wanted to talk to you all a little bit about what we do at Frontline Farming to sort of honor seeds and foodways and all the intersections of culture that make food. So we think of foodways as the intersection of food and cultural, social, and economic practices. So we think a lot about intersectionality. People think of it sometimes as an academic thought, and we think about it in terms of institutions. But really, we as humans ourselves are points of intersections. So even if I'm talking about housing or food or economics, I myself as a human encompass all of those intersections. Excuse me, I was just up here. At our farms here in Colorado, as I said, I'm a farmer first. We operate about 5 acres, 3 different plots. And in one of our farms at Sister Gardens, it's a really cool farm because it's all built on a terrace, which is, a traditional way of irrigation, retaining nutrients, not leaching things into the soil. And we've built out 3 different foodways at that farm. So we can go to our African foodways, Chesson. A lot of times when people come to farms, particularly Black people, we can have a lot of trauma, especially when the association for people and sometimes ourselves is only with enslavement and coming and toiling on the earth for people to exploit us. And so being able to welcome people into a space and say that your story is more than that. Actually, Africans brought so many seeds with them when they came here. Ways that they did that was through braiding it in their hair. They knew that seeds were going to be important. They knew that food is important. So there's so many different seeds that came to us in that way that we really don't connect in the American imaginative. It's also important to recognize whether it's Africans that were brought here or the 70% of immigrant and undocumented people who are doing our work in the fields today, who have been categorized as illegal but essential, that these people are actually engineers. They didn't come here and default into farming because they couldn't find jobs. All of our people from Mexico in particular, here in Colorado, Guatemala, our sheep herders that are often Peruvian, they have years, ancestors, histories of doing this. They can't be easily replaced. It's not a skill you can just learn in a day. So our African Foodways tries to honor that history, and we celebrate and plant seeds that come from Africa directly or the diaspora. So the diaspora is people who come from a certain place, a landmass, but then have been spread into other places. So there are Africans in the Caribbean islands, in Brazil, all over the world that make up the diaspora and have been refining seeds in those places. And so one other thing that we often don't think about is even like, how did people who were enslaved here eat? We often think of procurement, and that was, giving them the leftovers, which is the story of soul food. A lot of people will be like, oh, that's so unhealthy, or this and that. I don't like chitlins. But at the end of the day, those foods are stories of resistance, of living. The other way that, enslaved people survived was they foraged. They were great foragers to supplement their food. And then the other thing is, if they were allowed, they grew huck patches, but usually they weren't allowed, because if you still had energy to be farming, then you better be farming for the owner of the plantation. So oftentimes they did it at nighttime. And that's a place where a lot of the seeds they brought with them survived. So things like black-eyed peas, okra, which wasn't necessarily a favorite, and different things like that. So peanuts also come with that. So it's really important to us to show this beautiful history in food and to say that, we're also a part of this resilience. We're also a part of what made food, like the main foodways of American culture also exist. We're embedded in those stories. I like the story of Horace Pippin, who's a great seed saver. And one way that we honor this whole story is that we grow our seeds. We like to grow these different hot peppers, like the Buena Mulata he discovered, even though he's an African, actually folk artist. He found these seeds in the basement of his elders, and it was actually in a baby food jar called buena mulatas. And so that's why it got its name. It's such a beautiful, like purple pepper. And we take those and we make hot sauces. And there are African Foodways series of 3 hot sauces. And it's a real cool way where we can start from seed and yet to honor the legacy and tell the story of that as well. You can go on, Jal. Another foodway we have is our bioregional foodway. And our bioregional foodway gathers seeds from our indigenous communities and specifically these regions. And we practice, it's not only about the seeds, but ways of planting, like 3 Sisters plantings of corn, beans, and squash is one. You can do other varieties, different types of companion planting, and just being there to honor and try to preserve and give back to our indigenous communities rather than asking things of them. They've been holding it down for so long, and it's going to take so many of us to fight this fight. And people always say that history is written by the winner, but these histories aren't over, and the fight is still going. We can go to our last one. The last foodway that I started last year, as I said, I'm from Yemen. I'm an Arab person as well. And all of a sudden, when I kept seeing like different Palestinian seeds, Lebanese seeds, and Syrian seeds, I was just naturally collecting them or trying to buy them. And I just realized last year I was standing at my farm and I was like, whoa, I have a whole Arab foodways. How come I didn't think of that? And it's really interesting and sad, kind of like what Bill said about how, you know, the first places that we bomb during wars are seed banks. So what we did to the Syrian seed bank is so sad. And as Sarah had actually even explained to us, actually in all of the regions, as we've completely been destroying all of the Middle East, they actually from Iraq and other places had moved their seed banks to Syria because they thought Syria was going to be safe. And then we see what happened in Syria. So don't underestimate the potential of how important these things are. Food is what runs economies. Food is what sets our GDPs. Sometimes people forget that, you know, and they're like, oh, you're a farmer. It's like, yeah, like respect, you know, we all eat food. And it intersects. It's like we don't just do food as food, but it intersects into so many other dimensions. So I realized that I was collecting them, and a reason that is because so many people fleeing these wars are coming here and bringing their seeds, and so you're going to be seeing a lot more of these seeds. And as a side note, you know, being from Yemen, again, like things in Ethiopia, it's like famine is not a natural event. As a political scientist and as a child, I thought, I just got to get in there, and like people are just like confused and like there's some misunderstanding, but the world doesn't operate in benevolence. And we are seeing the worst famine in the world in Yemen. And the truth is, well, that's just what comes to fore to people's minds. We in the United States have been bombing Yemen for almost 10 years now, a country that is one of the poorest countries in the world even before this. And so when I was younger and I would tell people I'm from Ethiopia and Yemen in the United States, and people would say like, what, where's Yemen? What's this country? And, you know, we always understood that a lot of people in the US are very not world geographically inclined. It's sad. We have information. And so we kind of chalk it up to that. But now when I tell people I'm from Yemen and they say that, it's like, really? You don't know where it is when you are bombing that country actively right now? So it's interesting how these wars are being played out, and all of this uranium and these bombs are also coming from our indigenous lands here. And one of the things that Winona LaDuke says, you know, is as indigenous and BIPOC communities, we really spend over 80% of our time in these fights and advocacy against bad ideas. Good ideas are there. They've been there. It's just about politics and implementation and people acting like they share values that they're not willing to put into action. We can go to the last slide, Justin. So I wanted to leave you all with a little bit of, you know, sort of plants of ideas to encourage you to do these things. I've told you a little bit about the importance of data. I want to highlight to you all this really important project that we started as farmers And we are a people of color farmer advocacy and food justice organization. We realized that when the pandemic hit, that we needed to do, you know, as farmers, yeah, you wouldn't think of like having a lot of privileges, certainly economically, but we are so intelligent. We have so many ways of saving money. It's not just like only our backs we use. You have to be thinking and problem solving all the time. And so we recognized we needed to step into our privilege and do what we could for our ag workers who are out there and receiving no relief funds right now, and are just so forgotten in that way, and honoring the people who continue to carry this legacy food production for us in the United States. We've created a situation where by making them illegal, they can never come to these conversations and speak and advocate for themselves. And so it's important for people like me to make sure to remind people of who's doing this work of our food production. It's important for us to think in terms of interventions and not risk management. That's kind of that capitalist model that our earth can't afford anymore. And lastly, I just wanted to say that decolonization is not a metaphor. I hear people now saying, oh, let's decolonize this agenda. Oh, let's decolonize that. And it's like, what did you like actively just do to make substantive change? Free your mind and the rest follows is not the way it goes. Free your mind and action follows. And seed saving is a great way to put a lot of those values into action. So that's the end of my presentation. That's me in the grain and seed market in Ethiopia. Really missing home right now too. So honoring my farmers and land caretakers there. And again, Jasan, thanks for helping me. And I'll pass it back to you, Sarah.
I can hear a loud cheer from the audience to both you and Bill. Thank you so much, Fatima. This was so inspiring. I love the fact that you kind of started us off with like that we can all say seed save too, and in a way it reminded me of like trying to tune in with our inner child, you know, like saying that we should be more curious and like ask a lot of questions and try without fear. Like that's kind of like the feeling that you inspired at the beginning of your talk. And then you know, like I really appreciate the connection that you're making to the global perspective. You know, as I said at the beginning of the talk, I also come from the continent of Africa. I come from Egypt, where a lot of these you know, corporations, Monsanto, DuPont, and so forth, have been secretly working for decades actually in Egypt under different names as well. So in our case, they don't come in company called DuPont or Syngenta. They come in as a partnership with a local seed company, and suddenly you have these GMOs that people don't even know that they're there. And I really appreciate your storytelling on, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right. TEF? How do you say it? TEF. Okay. And coffee and like the patenting and even the fights of just regular people, like that one lawyer that you mentioned, that was really inspiring. And I love how you bring that home, like you bring that here and allow us all to learn. And I can't wait to come to Denver once the pandemic is over to see all these awesome foodways and reconnect with my own Arab one too. So I'm excited about all this. So I'm gonna invite Bill to also join us. We do have quite a few questions that people have been asking, and please continue to ask them in the chat if you have more. So Bill, I don't know if you're able to come back in. Everyone's saying thank you, wonderful, excellent presentation. Yeah, here's Bill coming in. Do I have to do something? Or does he just come in? I think I do. I pressed. Okay, here we go. Okay, so thanks, Bill, so much. Again, a big round of applause to both of you. This was so much to digest. I'm going to start with you, Bill. There's a number of questions that came through a little bit to explain something. So Jen, and I apologize if I'm saying people's name incorrectly, says patenting of varieties and of biological life forms is an egregious form of enclosing the commons of for capitalist plundering and profit. and was wondering who is doing this patenting. If they're open pollinated heirlooms, who is challenging these patents? So that's one question.
You know, it's just a handful of companies really that can afford to go through the process to do it. And so there really aren't that many targets. And that's one thing that does come up. If you do go to the Patent and Trade Office, you can find out who owns the patents for the varieties that do come up. I mean, I think, you know, the vast majority of patents for seeds have been given in this country to Monsanto, which is now Bayer. It's a German company. The vast majority that I can find of certified organic seeds, and this is the open pollinated, the lettuce that I talked about, are being patented by a German company, chemical company called Enzazaden, E-N-Z-A. And Enzazaden has a spin-off company underneath it called Vitalis Seeds, and they're the people that actually interface with U.S. Distributors like Johnny's and High Mowing and Territorial and others to make sure that those seeds get into catalogs in the United States. So, you know, Europe's been way better. They have a no patents on seeds campaign. And what they did was pull together, I can't remember, but it's many nonprofits to fight together. And they've been fighting for a number of years. And what they've done is come up with a pretty interesting solution, I think, that we could, at least for a next step that we might want to think about adopting here. And that is, no, right now, it's being challenged by these same companies in court. So never say never. You know, these guys are relentless in trying to get this overturned. But right now, after months of litigation back and forth, the European courts have ruled that you cannot patent a plant variety if it was created through essentially biological processes. That means regular breeding. It has to be genetically modified because that fits more the definition anyway. I think there's something really, you know, interesting about this. So, you know, utility patents are given to new inventions. That's the patent law. It's not a new patent law for plants. It's the one we've always had for computer chips, for new software languages, for all those sorts of things. So now we're allowing them to patent burgundy and lettuce as one of those things. In Europe, that doesn't make sense. So what they're saying is that it has to be genetically engineered. You have to put genes in and change it. That is an invention, and we'll let you do that. But everything else cannot be patented. And you know, if we could go to that in this country, that would be great. That's what we should, I think everybody on the street, I think that would be easy to argue for. And over a 10-year period in Europe, that's what they finally got passed. And both the major European patenting organizations there recognize that now. And so now there's a big battle legally over what it means to have a biological process, right? So now the companies are drilling down. It's just this relentless way to keep privatizing things. But I would love it if we could see our own patent-free seed campaign that we've been working on at Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance move and adopt that nationally. And I would invite all of you, if you want to get involved in that. We need help on all sorts of levels to raise awareness about this.
Thank you, Bill. I'll pass it on to Fatima. There's a lot of thank you for recognizing indigenous farmers and for telling us, you know, these stories from Ethiopia and so forth. One person, Sarah, talks about how recognizing cultural trauma on this land is so important. And I was wondering how relating to the foodways that helps with that, how that supports it, why foodways as a general thing is something that is more important than just thinking of individual seeds.
Sure. I just wanted to make one note too on seeds that, and to speak to sort of the genetically modified labeling, that there's no commercially available genetically modified seeds here. You can't just get vegetable GMO seeds as a kind of producer. And I think it's really important because there's kind of a game with marketing that's happening there that leads to and confusion. So when you see these seed companies saying non-GMO seeds, that's just like redundant. And this happened to me a couple months ago with my little sister at the store, and she was like, Fatima, can water be non-GMO? This says it's non-GMO. And I was like, oh man, but there's a disservice that does in confusing people about what's really happening.
Right.
And then they use that for marketing perspectives. And that's not very helpful. So I just wanted to say, like, a lot of times when we're talking about it, people get freaked out. And it's like, you're probably not getting or buying or anything like that that's technically genetically modified. Right, Bill?
Right. That doesn't mean that it hasn't been contaminated.
Yeah.
With pollen, especially in corn. But you're right, generally. And that's why we could go to this European style campaign and say, okay, if you want to patent, do genetically modified, because none of us small growers and gardeners have access to that stuff anyway. So it wouldn't, it wouldn't hurt us economically at all. But you're right. That's a very important point.
And to answer that question, thank you for that question. Foodways are important as opposed to just saying like seeds in that way to us and having that, because we like to look at people as whole individuals, and we like to look at things as systems and not be reductionist in our approach. These are all interrelated things. And when we can understand that and not just reduce it to its profitability, its productivity, and different things like that, then we can start to truly live in those communal ways with plants and the people who coexist with them. I like this theory even about wheat, how wheat has really become spread across the world. And people would say that really wheat domesticated humans, because in its own form, wheat is not something that just wants to go and survive and be everywhere. And we as humans have taken it around everywhere and kind of created our social hierarchies and systems based on being able to produce it, cultivate it, till land, and store it in those ways that allows them to feed people and have different chains of people playing different roles within our systems, So I think it's about and trying to avoid sort of that reductionist way of thinking. And I saw this question about the types of education.
Yeah,
here.
I was going to ask you that question.
Yeah. And I hear you. And that's why.
Maybe we can read it out. So is this Kelda's message? Western education in places like Africa and the Middle East. You showed how important it is for academics and lawyers from these cultures to be able to vocalize to the settler class what is happening, like you have here today. But on the other hand, I can understand how Western style schools disrupt intact cultures. What do you see the role of different types of education and access?
So true. And why I left academia, I really don't ever say or lead with like I'm a professor, and it's just so weird how people automatically like think you're so intelligent or valuable. I always lead with like I'm a farmer, respect me for that. And I completely things like that disrupt those cultures. And there's roles for honoring so many types of education. I can tell you as, a child of immigrants, we often, like my mother, contains so much knowledge and education. And she comes here and they make you feel like, oh, well, she should just like go to community college and learn all these other skills. But like, she actually contains so much knowledge in herself that we don't honor. And so, of course, all of these other traditional ways of knowledge do matter. And I think what matters more is how we as humans honor that and respect it. And for me in academia, I thought living in a white supremacist nation that, by going into academia, that the higher up I got, the more, people would be conscious, and I just needed to make it past these steps. And the reality is, the higher up I got in academia, the more racist it was. That's just the reality. These are the institutions that actually codify and create these systems and are looked to even right now in terms of our food crises. It's the same academic institutions that they're calling to give their expertise, and they're the experts. And we're like, well, how, like just on a simple level, how are you calling the same people in that gave you the same data and advice that has led us to the point that we're at right now? And it's a fight to get in those rooms. So sometimes people like me have a role in code switching to get in there, but I don't value that. And I do think it's disruptive to other forms and cultures as well. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate that question as well. And I kind of, it's like a self-reflection. I'm here to do my PhD. You know, I've been sent from my country so that I can become the expert and go back. But in reality, the expertise is, yeah, like you just said, your mother, your family, all these farmers and so forth. And so in a way, this paper that I'm going to get is just going to be a way to get more people to listen to that conversation. So it's kind of like a weird go around that we kind of work with. Okay, so there's a few questions here about seed libraries, and I think they're to both of you. So I'm going to read both questions. Kana says, now under the lockdown situation, many local seed libraries are closed. And I heard that there was a high demand on local seed suppliers last year. I wonder if you have suggestions or know how, about creative ways of sharing seeds locally during this time. And then someone else said in a discussion regarding seed libraries, it was suggested that creating free online databases of our collections that included detailed descriptions of the varietal traits that would help keep traits as being seen and not novel enough to be patented with multinationals apply. Do you see any benefit and a way to collaborate in this shared way among the many small seed saving projects? This is to both of you. So suggestions, creative ways, and yeah, go ahead.
Well, suggestion for seed libraries, there is going to be a seed library summit. I see the date is, let me look here. I just want to make sure, April 17th. And you can find out information about it by going to seedlibraries.net. And that is what they're going to discuss. Seed librarians from all over the country are going to get together and figure out how to do that. There have been some spectacular examples, like, you know, the seed library in Tucson, which was started by the Tucson Community or Public Library, already has interlibrary loan. So anybody with a computer can go and order up their seeds, and then you can come down to one of the library branches, whatever one's close to you, and pick them up. I mean, that's the Cadillac system. Others have opened, say, once a month, you know, and do social distancing, have tables or whatever. You're right. It's really important that we keep these systems open and functioning, and we've all been challenged a bit. And so hopefully we're over the hump with that, but those are the things. And so, you know, I highly recommend, if you have a seed library, you know, go to seedlibraries.net and hook into that network of people, and you can ask questions there right away, where seed librarians will answer them. And they've got a really great newsletter that comes out, Cool Beans, that Rebecca Newburn writes. That's really fabulous. So that's the seed library question. And what was the other? The other part was, I'm trying to.
I was talking to myself. Yeah, the second question is creating free online databases of our collections that included detailed descriptions and so forth. Do you see any benefit in or a way to collaborate in a shared way among the many small seed saving projects?
No. The world does not need another database. Yeah, you know, I'm exaggerating. Great tools, you know, obviously, but the problem is, you know, the Andrew Kimbrell, and the if you want one of those, you can go to the Andrew Kimbrell's organization, and they've got the global seed network set up. They got $1 million grant to set up a global seed network, to, you know, online database to do that. Also, I was part of a committee that worked with Seed Savers Exchange and what they call Seed Change now, an organization in Canada, the Bauta Family Initiative, to do the same thing, especially around setting up community-based seed exchange systems and have a global network of that sort of thing. And they both have the same problem, in my opinion, is that there's not enough people to do it yet. There aren't millions of people, you know, reawakened and saving. And so at this point, I encourage everybody to do the most important thing there is: grow and save some of your own seeds. And when you do that, you'll have more than you need. So then you have to share. So look close to you first, because those are the easiest people to share with. They're from your backyard. You've got the stories. They're resistant to your diseases. They've adapted to your climate. That's why we started Rocky Mountain, is that it's a regional network where it's easier for us. Once we find something that works, it works. And it starts to spread. And once we have community and regional networks that are really vibrant, then let's hook them all together. Great idea. And then we'll actually have, the muscle to do it. But I think way too much time and attention and money is spent building databases. And I think it's I understand it. I'm a database guy. It's too much fun to sit at home, and that's the world we're coming from. What we need are people out on the ground actually doing it first. And that would inform actually and make those networks better. None of the networks I know have day-to-day seed savers at the base of them when they write up all that stuff, because frankly, most of the information they ask for, the traits or whatever, aren't necessary for us now to set up our own regional food networks. They're only necessary for industrial scale agriculture, and we'll never have the expertise or the training or the computers or the money to do data on the level that they need anyway. So why pretend? We're just pretending that we're like them. It's that cult of expertise. We're trying to be real about it. Well, what's real is what Joseph Lofthouse in his land-raised gardening says. He's one of the most spectacular new breeders in the world. He's being celebrated. He's on boards and all these conferences he's speaking. And I just heard him, and somebody asked him, well, so what records do you keep, Joseph? He goes, none. All I do is go out and see what works, and I eat it. And if it tastes good, I plant it again. That, obviously he would say the same thing at some point, especially if you want to industrialize those things he finds. We're going to need that data, but we're way far away from that as far as I'm concerned. We don't have that diversity in every community yet, or those stories. So long-winded, but it's just, I think it's an important point. It's my own pet peeve now. I'm tired of databases.
Let's be in the earth for sure. I wonder, Fatima, if you have anything to add to that. You were saying that if you don't do that, you can support at least people doing it.
Yeah, everyone's got their roles. I know everyone isn't necessarily going to be out there on the ground doing it, but find ways you can directly support things like the Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance. There's just so many different people who are out there toiling, so that's also another way to support. But Bill covered it.
Yeah. There was one more question that I don't think I covered, which was from Carolina, who was asking Bill actually, is whether the situation of gene editing is going on worldwide, or if this is particular to the United States.
Well, the effects of it.
Bill, hold on one second. I just want to say that we have another, I think it's supposed to start at 2:45, but we can take as soon as, so we'll take, if you go over there and it hasn't started yet, that means we just haven't started it yet. So okay. I'm going to head over there. Thank you so much, Bill and Fatima.
Thank you.
This has just been amazing. I've had to run out and do other things, but so I'm very glad it's recorded. I'm looking forward to watching it again. Too. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. So the companies that are doing gene editing are very few. They're large. It still costs a lot of money to go through the regulatory and get them introduced, and to actually do all the traditional breeding that it takes to actually introduce a new variety. But the effects of those companies and what they're doing is having a dramatic effect worldwide. Let me give you an example. About 60% of the countries in Africa have accepted utility patenting or some extreme form of intellectual property protection around seeds that are being introduced there, sometimes their own varieties that have been patented, right? And they've agreed to abide by those laws in return for being able to join the global trading community, right? We're sort of, and even though in the United Nations and in the Treaty for Plant Genetics, there's an exemption for what we call smallholder farmers in the global South. The 55 million farmers in Africa don't have to abide by that, but they've never been educated by that. All they've seen are company representatives and people then that are affected in their government by those company representatives. And so this huge myth that's actually got the majority of them playing by these rules, that are destroying their local seed saving and their activities under the guise of innovation. You know, that was probably the scariest thing I heard. Bill, we will not have innovation unless we have intellectual property protection.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that.
Mm.
All the food, all the people, everything we've created was never created then, right? Because we didn't have it. We shared it, right? And that's what we want to go back to and share. It's like, shh, those guys think they're the only ones up here. You know?
Great. So as Allison said, we are nearing the end of our session and should start moving to the next one. But I do want to leave you with any final thoughts that you might have. As I know that Fatima, you've been reading the chat. It's been quite an active chat with people answering each other, which I love. But I'm wondering if you have any final thoughts for us before we move to the next session.
No final thoughts. Actually, Josan is going to drop here a link that poem that kind of encapsulates some of this that we worked on for Black and Brown Growers Collective. So check it out and use a different art form to get the feels about this and get in action. And just thank you, Bill. Such an honor to be here with you today.
Thank you.
Thanks for your wisdom and everything that you do for seed savers, especially for in our region. And you are a giant to me. So thank you.
Oh, it's the genius of the team. Poem written by Dr. Gary Nabin, and that's how I feel. Is I'm just lucky and feel great to be part of this. And my final thought is, do not underestimate the power you have. If you have a few seeds, they're exponential, potential in those seeds. You could grow we've examples in the history of agriculture of a handful of seeds growing into millions of pounds and changing whole cultures. And that's in every seed that you hold. And that is the force that'll remind us that we are more powerful. It'll keep us hopeful. There's hope in every time you plant a seed. So just get down on your knees, plant and save your own seeds and then share them. And that will naturally pull you into everything else that we're talking about. You can just ask questions on the way. It's all out there, all the seed saving. Don't get caught up in this cult of expertise that makes you think that you can't do that. That's what's really holding us down. We are more powerful. And the seeds that you save will be more powerful for you where you are than anything you could buy, period. Thanks.
Thank you all so much, and hope to see you in the next sessions. There's going to be some really wonderful speakers there as well. Wonderful day, and keep seed saving and keep growing your own everything.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.